Welcome to Perceptions Today podcast, where we discuss consciousness in all forms. September 2022, episode 32. Stephanie Quick joins us in a roundtable about synchronicity, part 1 of 4. Stephanie Quick is a researcher who has a passion for synchronicities, erotic mysticism, and much more.
So many of these happen around very charged emotions. There's a lot of ones that happen around humor or sex, but then also very much about concern for loved ones. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that, you know, the dragonfly is a big symbol, and the more that you dig into it, right, there's certain these animals that are iridescent and have the rainbow. It recalls to us, you know, rainbows and those iridescence is always very associated with divinity, divine grace. In, I think, Haitian voodoo, like the Aloha, divine femininity. And these insects, such as, and a lot of amphibians too.
This is an instance of the conversation coming up in the roundtable discussion. Participants knew it was being recorded. Welcome to Perceptions Today. It's the 23rd of March 2022, Twitter Space Chat 27. We're going to be discussing synchronicities with Stephanie Quick. We have an hour and a half going over stories and questions, which will be great. Along with, remember that Twitter Space will be recording the actual environment. I will be recording for myself for the podcast. And at any time, obviously, hold on to any personal information unless you want it included within the podcast. And if you do forget and let that information out, please tell me and I will make a note and then edit it out. What we do here is Perceptions Today deals in consciousness research in all areas. I'm your host, Paul. Your co-host would have been CentredAwareness, also known as Melissa. We will give her credit. She's just busily packing. And what we will go on to is the quick public service announcements. We have some events which are turning up on the 6th of April from 9 to 11 a.m. and then from 3 to 5 p.m. UK time. Anthony Peake, the author, is coming to do another meet and greet, and he will be returning for the 5th time, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. Then on the 19th of April at 7 p.m, we got Laird Scranton coming to discuss his book, Wisdom of the Ancients. And he's a returning guest talking on symbology and how consciousness and ancient civilizations and current ones are incorporating knowledge of astronomy and also quantum physics all in their stories, mythology, and culture. If you want to be kept up to date, we have a mailing list, a podcast, YouTube channels, and a contact email address. And you can find this all in the bio of the Twitter account link. So that's linktr.ee/perceptions today. And that will give you all the other lists, including a link in there that tells you all the different upcoming events. We always load in more events as we go along, which is great. Today, our guest is Stephanie Quick, who's been researching synchronicities and other strange things for more than 20 years and has a very good blog, which I've included in the audio trailer in the podcast and here, which, getting in the right order, is Ghost Dog is a Mystery Box. And over to yourself, Stephanie. No giggling.
I know it's that. Well, I was just talking before we started recording about I've had a very frazzled morning, including the dog all of a sudden deciding he wanted a bunch of attention, like right when I'm trying to concentrate on trying to come across as a little bit more like I maybe know what I'm talking about. But it's fun. Yeah, today we're talking about synchronicities, and we've already had a fun one because the first person who asked a question, and they were basically saying, you know, who are you, is one of the people in the space called Fred. Now, Fred actually is one of my first names. I have a number of names, but when I was in elementary school, I got the nickname Fred or Freddie from this comic strip called Odd Bodkins that my dad and I used to like to read together. So that's one of my, we share a name. So that's kind of a fun little name game synchronicity right off the bat. But yeah, so as far as synchronicities go, I have indeed, for about the last 20 years, been pretty interested in synchronicities. Before I became interested in them, I was just always very interested in truth and states of mind and systems for knowing about the world from the time that I was very, very young. I became very ill when I was in high school, developed big problems breathing and autoimmune problems, and had to take a lot of intensive treatments for them. And all that resulted in me becoming even more interested in states of mind, control of the emotions. I had yoga offered at my high school when I was growing up, and so I always just kind of did some yoga, even though it was just kind of like high school PE yoga. It was still pretty good. They still taught corpse pose and everything, which has very much to do with relaxation, cultivating a relaxed state of mind along with the body, interrogating your body, mind, emotion systems, and developing that neutrality towards it all. As part of meditation. So I was very fortunate there. And then as a result of a medical crisis, when I was 20 or 21, I had a big near-death experience, and it put me in touch with these discarnate teaching beings. Okay, that's what happened. And I've had this relationship with them since then. So it was like, I don't know, 35 years or something at this point, over that. Probably 40 years. Anyway, yeah, about 40 years. But it always cracks me up because I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area and have spent a lot of time in Berkeley, lived in Berkeley for many years, and I sound like one of like those Berkeley ladies with 8 million scarves walking down Telegraph Avenue in this cloud of incense. But these experiences happen to a lot of people, and that's what happened to me. Now, this is before near-death experiences were like widely known culturally. I didn't hear any. I didn't really realize that is what had happened to me till several years later. I didn't speak about it, although I interrogated those experiences as best, and the recommendations that were made to me for various like meditational and energetic practices by these beings, and they were very much, we're giving you this, work with it yourself, and don't trust us. They were very much into my own freedom of choice as to what I would choose to believe or choose to do. Anyway, so then I ended up in my early 30s getting involved with some different spiritual practices. I went and lived at a Tibetan Buddhist meditation center for a few years with the Rinpoche there. And I studied with Leslie Temple Thurston, who's a meditation teacher. Her group is corelight.org. CORELIGHT. They have a lot of free materials and resources on their website, and I always recommend her materials very highly. And I also studied with and was involved with a woman who had studied deeply North American indigenous practices. She had been leading a sweat lodge every month for over 20 years at the time that I met her and stuff. So I learned a lot about that from her, as well as some Chinese and Taoist systems for the 5-element cycle and acupressure meridians and stuff. So suffice it to say, I was well and truly steeped in all of this and doing a fair amount of practicing. I meditate daily. I did a lot of yoga. And then I was about 40, so it's about 20 years ago. I had been married just for like 2 or 3 years, and I became very ill again with the autoimmune disease, and I had to take like a screamingly high amount of prednisone for months on end in order to get better, and it gave me really bad, as it turned out, nerve damage. So I was in incredible pain, and I mean, it was to the point where, just riding in the car with my husband, driving down to the grocery store, picking up a few things and coming back, I would be like crumpled on the floor crying. It was horrible. When they say things like, oh, you go blind from the pain, it turns out it's not like a metaphor. Things can get that bad. So I was in.
Oh, can I quickly pause you on that one and tell you something as literally on the point of going blind from the pain? One of the community, Humanity Hoax, back on our chat on number 6, which was all about near-death experiences, he was talking about his accident within a train where there was a collision. Because everything happened so fast, as soon as the glass was breaking, his whole vision went black and white, as if all the bandwidth was being just processed for survival, took away all the color so that he could see that. And he went along those lines and had that experience. And I'm just putting that part of the podcast up at some point. But it was a fascinating one because of his point on the near-death one there. And when it comes down to pain as well, I got knowledge of extreme pain as well, that it does reduce your kind of input to just being completely focused on that as well. And you just don't want to be inside yourself. You want to be elsewhere entirely.
Yeah. It messes with your perception and what you can actually even take in from your senses, your normal senses. So, and I'd only been married for maybe about 3 years at that point. And it was just, I was around I was not ready to give up on life. Let's put it that way. And I had been going to these doctors about this pain and they couldn't find anything. And it was getting bad because, you start saying, okay, I'm in a lot of pain and they can't find anything wrong. And they start figuring that you're a drug seeker. And then I already had one doctor, I'd said the wrong thing and he wouldn't take my calls anymore. So I was getting desperate. Anyway, so I always reading a lot of weird books, and I was reading a book by this guy, and I think it was a friend of Tim Beckley's. I haven't been able to track down the book that it was since then. It was like an old book that the library took out of circulation just like a few months after I read it. But he was talking about synchronicities. He was talking about how they're very much related to all other type of weird phenomena, near-death experiences, alien encounters, seeing a flying saucer, ghosts, poltergeists, visits from the... basically everything is going to have synchronicities as like a side dish accompanying it. It's like, like the fries that come with. So, and he was also interesting is saying that the main ingredient that you need to get synchronicities going is to just notice them. Just notice any synchronicities that come up, read about other people's synchronicities, talk about them to people, and just start noticing funny relationships, even if it's not necessarily a synchronicity. But if you see something where it's like, that's kind of a funny conjunction, just kind of get your mind thinking along those lines of association.
Just going to add to that one for you. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that we had obviously the conversation scheduled for last year? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, due to the fact that you couldn't make it, we still went ahead with the date. Because there was about 40 of us within the conversation for about, say, 4 hours plus. The next day, so that was on a Tuesday, come the Saturday, there were so many synchronicities that 4 or 5 of us were talking about, and it just kind of escalated. It was almost as if you're charging a battery that on your own, you didn't have that many synchronicities so rapidly, but when you had so many more people thinking about it, suddenly they just ramped up entirely. So I believe that entirely.
That is an excellent point that a number of people have noticed that practicing on your own is great, but if you can find compatible people to kind of throw in with you, you can really, like you say, it's just like supercharging a battery and you can really get things going. It seemed to me, I don't know why, but I had this insight. I thought, I'm in this real desperate situation and I need desperately a diagnosis so I can move forward with whatever's going on. And I had an appointment to see a neurologist about this problem in about a month from the time I was reading this book. And I thought, it seems to me that every time I've had a turnaround in my health situation, like with my near-death experience, right? I had this like big numinous encounter, visionary encounter, and I'd had other experiences like that. But I was nowhere near like sick enough to have like a near-death experience or something, and I didn't want to be. So I thought, well, maybe if I just try to drum up some of these synchronicities, it'll kind of help get that kind of numinous magical energy going, and it can kind of help me towards a diagnosis, which looking back on it, it was like a kind of a classic ritual working in many ways, although I didn't see it that way at the time. It was just kind of intuitive. So I started to concentrate on synchronicities and trying to drum them up. Now, because I'd done a lot of meditation and yoga, relaxation and stuff, I was more used to using my awareness in that way, as opposed to having to making an altar or anything, like doing anything physical. For me, it was like an attentional thing. The other thing is that with my teacher, Leslie Temple Thurston, she talks a lot about kind of creating your body, mind, emotion, and subtle body system, constructing it and manipulating it in certain ways. So it's kind of like the temple or the altar, the sacred space that you carry with you and manipulate that way through your own awareness and attention. Anyway, so I started to get some good hits. I had a fun one with my dad. A lot of guys in my family on both sides are like car crazy and plane crazy. So my dad, I was going with him. He wanted to get some golf stuff. So we're going through the Caldecott Tunnel, and I see this car that has, they have those tubes on the side. It looks kind of like a fish's gills. And so it's an unusual car thing. I'm like, oh, Dad, look what Baba. He's like, oh, yeah. So he spends like 10, 15 minutes telling me all about exactly how this works to interact with the system of the car's engine to make it more or whatever. And of course, I'm not that interested in cars, so I was kind of paying very much attention to all this, but Dad was having a good time. And it was fun. We get to the golf store, and he ends up having to drive once around the block because we kind of missed the turnoff. And then as we come back around to go in, there is a car right in front of us, and it has, again, these 3 little gills on the side, which is fun because we'd just been talking about that. But the kicker is it had a personalized license plate, and it started out for her. So it's like, a synchronicity for me, right? So that was pretty fun. But then the day that I was going to go see this doctor, I ended up, that morning, I went on a walk, as I usually did. I had like my Vicodins that I would use to have a walk every morning so that I wouldn't, just be laying there in bed all day. And I make kind of a loop. I was coming back, and I was kind of looking up. There's like a small rise. And I see coming over the rise my neighbor and her little dog Biscuit. And then she has like a new dog on her leash. I was like, wow, there she is. And then something distracted me. I looked away. I looked back, and Biscuit has turned like into a small white translucent cube. And then they all vanished. And I was like, what? And then, I don't know, within like 20, 30 seconds, she comes over the crest of the hill, and she has the new dog. And it turned out that Biscuit, her dog that I had really loved and visited with a lot, had died, and she had this new puppy, which is the first that I'd learned of any of that. So, and that's the only time I've ever seen like a doppelganger. I've seen ghost dogs since then. But, and then that afternoon I got my diagnosis. So, and there wasn't like a lot they could do. They could do, stuff to definitely make me have a more functional life. But so it worked. It worked for the purpose that I wanted it to work for. And then I also had some good synchronicities, and then this odd kind of doppelganger or Vartigar, and seeing Biscuit the ghost dog. So that got me really interested in synchronicities. And since then, the other big experiment that I did, this is probably about 5 years ago, a guy named Steve Ray and I were both fans of the Radio Mysterioso radio podcast show, which Greg Bishop hosts. And Steve contacted me. He said, do you want to secretly experiment? We can choose target words and see if we can get synchronicities to show up on these live broadcasts of this show. So I thought that sounded like fun. And he had a really great insight. And it's funny because Steve had designed this experiment. And then a few years ago, Jacques Vallée gave a big talk at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, had a big conference. And he had the key, I want to say the rubber chicken dinner. They like the keynote address or something. And he'd said the same thing, which is that what the beauty of the internet is, you can document so many things as far as time and date stamps. And this does not solely go down to things that are happening on the internet. Like sometimes people will be like, oh, I was thinking about XYZ, and then I got an ad for XYZ show up in my feed. And sometimes that could be just because of you were searching that and you didn't realize it, or because they've profiled you through algorithms of stuff. But you can also, for example, if you want to choose a target to try and get to show up for, if you're trying to do a synchronicity experiment, which is what I've concentrated on since then, is like trying to get synchronicities to happen that I can then examine and analyze to try and figure out what's going on. Or to to kind of give other people that haven't had weird experiences an insight into kind of what it's like and kind of how they work. But you can just say to yourself, and this is what Steve and I did, we'd only communicate electronically through like email or DMs. And so everything's time and date stamped. And we say, okay, we're shooting for the next show, and we're going to choose the target of bricks or honeybees or whatever. And then, and this gets to what you were saying, Paul, about talking about synchronicities. We'd end up just kind of like talking about it, free associating to each other about whatever our target was, joking about things and stuff. Lots of times we would end up making kind of jokes about something else that wasn't on topic, and then you get kind of an echo of the joke showing up on the show. Things like that. So I think that that was we got some good hits on that. One was kind of controversial because we'd chosen the target word of heat, which is kind of non-specific, but we chose it anyway. And then on the next live show, as it ended up, the host, Greg, had parked outside the radio station because it was at that point he was broadcasting out of a pirate radio station. And he had to leave the studio because there'd been like an accident in the car next to his was smoking outside the studio. So I think maybe we got a little bit carried away with that one. But yeah.
That's not much fun to doing that to people. I was just going to quickly put tag into there the very short. I've thought of a way of how to abridge the whole story about the battery bit. So, for example, one of the community called the Tamara Dick sent me information on the Saturday saying a company had actually patented how to do teleportation, and she attached a GIF image of The Fly from the 1980s, the film, with Jeff Goldblum. And then I sent a message over to RN Vooght and said, oh, by the way, this is ridiculous. What's going to happen? Because if you basically duplicate the human body and say there's one molecule out, will it still get the connection to your consciousness, or will you just end up with just, a bag of flesh? Meanwhile, he goes, this is spooky. My girlfriend's just told me, because he's living a distance from her, he said, why couldn't you just learn how to teleport from one location to the next? And then there was another one that turned up. So there's all these different ones that all kind of coincided over probably about 10 minutes or less from people all on different sides of the world. It wasn't actually like everyone sitting in the same room talking about it. So it is quite weird when these things happen.
It is. And it's to me, it's more evidential, let's say, because like you say, you're all separated and then you're all kind of popping up with the same thought. And just the other point I want to make, because I think sometimes this can get a little bit confusing, especially when you're first starting to try and tease this apart or kind of make it more systematic in your mind, is that if people, like, those conversations refer back to actual events in the real world, right? It's not just, I think sometimes people, and skeptics, and I don't have a problem. Some of my best friends are skeptics. No, but it's true. I think it's important to be skeptical, and I think it's.
Do you have that T-shirt?
Pardon?
Do you have that T-shirt with a slogan across the back?
Oh my gosh. That it's important, and one of the points that I try and make about synchronicities, and when if you go on my blog, I have a lot of posts that are tagged on synchronicities, and some of them are just documenting my own ones, so that people can see for themselves, okay, this set of events really did happen as I've laid out. And you can see that there are certain things, like if everyone's got like the same ad, or everyone went on Google and they all saw, oh wow, we all saw that it was the same whatever Google's feature of the day was or something. I mean, that's kind of like an artifact of the digital age. But in this instance, when everyone is reporting separately that they've had this kind of thought or question or run across that's different. Let's see. I had a show on synchronicities that I did in Project Archivist with Rojan Razorwire and David Metcalf.
Everybody should go and listen to Project Archivist. Fantastic show. Been listening since 2005 to those people. It's great.
Rojan is awesome, and it's great because there's just like a huge archive and there's just a ton of different stuff in there. And Rojan he's a really fun person. He's great too because he's the type of person that is like, he's still, even though he's been looking at all this weird stuff for a long time, he still gets like surprised and cracks up and stuff. So he's still very fresh. But anyway, I told Rojan and David, I'm like, okay, you guys, keep an eye out for any synchronicities because I want to get as many synchronicities as possible on the show. And so it was weird because Rojan is like an empath. He's discussed this on the Green Lion podcast, actually, with me and Taylor Bell, which is you will have the emotions and physical sensations bleeding over from people that you're close to. And he has this group of people that all kind of have this to varying degrees, and they like the central metaphor of the moth, and the moth being attracted to the flame as something that they all kind of use as a metaphor when they're talking about this amongst themselves. So it was weird because the morning that we were going to record that show, I was super worked up and nervous. I went and took a walk, and on my walk, which I take all the time, I saw on the path, there were these two moths mating. So I'm like, well, that's unusual. I don't know if you can hear Oliver going crazy. Hopefully he'll calm down. But so
he adds to the ambience, don't worry.
The real life feeling. Anyway, so I'm like, well, that's unusual. It's weird. So I took a picture. I'm always taking pictures of natural stuff. I took a picture of these two moths. Then I don't know if it was then or later, I listened to Weird Studies, and they're like, oh, and I saw that where I downloaded their podcast. They're like, oh, it's about John Keel, the Mothman prophecies. I'm like, wow, we're getting to like a moth theme today. I start listening, and they mention my blog, where I talk about this one synchronicity, a particular post. And they also talk about how the phenomenon kind of tells on you, which is another thing to keep in mind if you want to start experimenting with any type of attentional practice, right? You're going to find those parts of yourself that are embarrassing or goofy or maybe private will tend to come up, or shadow material. And then we ended up just having like all these other kind of moth-related synchronicities during the show, and then after the show, one guy was listening, and I guess that he had just stopped listening to the show at one point, and then that night he ended up watching for the first time with his twins that he has a show of a Mothra. I forget which Mothra movie. They liked it. He turned it on and started listening the next day, just at the point where David Metcalf starts like talking about Mothra and the princesses singing to him, right? So it's like all this kind of moth stuff. So you can see there where it's coming from all these kind of different angles, different levels of reality. You have like actual moths. You have a podcast dropping on the day talking about the Mothman prophecies, which was a monster that's not actually like a moth. Is Oliver being too awful? Should I go out and try and...
If he needs to be looked at, don't worry, I can fill space, etc.
Okay, well, my mom is supposed...
You go check, I'll just keep everything flowing, don't worry. Anyway, so it's nice to see Peanut and Oil in. I haven't seen you for a while, apart from yesterday. Miro, nice to see you. And Tupacabra, good to see you in as well. And also Shadow Fox, nice to see you in. Yeah, when it comes down to these scenarios, and we'll go over them even further, at the moment, meanwhile, in the shared section, you'll find I've put up a couple of books which are on synchronicity, which are fascinating to read, as well as Stephanie's actual website in there, which is Ghost Dog is a Mystery Box, her blog, where you can go and find lots of information of what she has been collating. And again, if you're not too familiar, the Wikipedia entry of Carl Jung talking about synchronicities as well, and basically coined the phrase back in the day for this. While there is a bit of a space, does anybody else want to check their audio so that they can get in and put their hand up later on for talking and getting in? Because I see that we've obviously got, hopefully I'm going to pronounce this correct, it's Marval, or I'm not very good on some names when it gets there. And let's see, we've got 2 requests. Right, oh, for some reason, Supercover got bounced out. And also there, and Fred. Let's see, let's make sure this audio is working correctly. Shadow Fox.
Yeah, testing. Test.
You're very good at testing. It works, which is good.
Check.
That's
check. Cool.
I assume you hear me.
I can definitely hear yourself, Myron, and also Chupacabra. It's just identifying voices to my ear when I've only heard a few people, like from yesterday. It makes it easier, because sometimes when I look at different parts of different screens when you're not there and come back, some people go back to me so quick that I don't recognize who they are, and that becomes the fun part. Now, Stephanie, are you back?
I'm back.
So as I was saying to the people, I don't know how much you heard or whether you had your headset on as you were walking around, just to see whether I'm going to repeat myself or not. Were you listening as you were walking around?
No, I had to have a little bit of intervention.
That's fine. So above in the shared section, I put up your actual blog with your ID as well, and also 2 books, Synchronicity, and also the one Wikipedia entry from obviously talking about Carl Jung and synchronicities. So that's there for people to look at.
Yeah.
And when you're talking, some of the ones that we've had, which were quite amazing. One morning I was looking at the plants at one side of the house, and I felt that a twitch in my brain that said, you got to go to the other side of the house and go down towards where the car is. And I thought, okay, I don't really want to do this, but let's go and see. Go down to the front windscreen. Lo and behold, bottom corner of the windscreen is a big dragonfly, and it looks like it's dead on the windscreen. Now, I'm very much into macro photography. Dragonflies are one of my kind of favorite ones to go and take images of, and they're always very difficult to get hold of because, lo and behold, they move very quickly. So I get down there, and I'm gently picking it up and thinking, oh, I could take photos of you, but you're dead, and I don't really want to do that. So I got it on my hand, being gentle and thinking, I'll go and put it somewhere out of the way. And within a few minutes, the body heat of me reactivated the dragonfly because it was in the cold and the dark in the environment. So then it got up and disappeared off, and I went, oh, that's a shame. I could have actually taken a photo. So I'm back in the house. An hour and a half later, my brain goes, you need to go into the garden. So I think, right, okay, I'm taking my camera, because last time I miss out on opportunities. So I'm out in the garden, and lo and behold, I get buzzed by a dark shape. And it turns out to be a dragonfly, not the same one. But it goes across, sits on a chair, sits perfectly. I get up, I get a really good snapshot. Now, the location that I'm in, we don't have a massive population of dragonflies or anything. If you see 4 or 6 over a summer, that's amazing because we're not next to massive bodies of water. But I went, wow, if that hadn't have all happened, I would never have got to go and photograph. And I got this really great image of this other dragonfly. So it was quite phenomenal at that point. Now, I didn't see whether Myron or Shadow Fox put their hand up first. So, Stephanie, who did you see put their hand up first? Or weren't you watching either?
I think it was Myron.
Okay, Myron.
Okay, a couple of things that are really kind of cool. Yesterday, out of nowhere, my daughter wanted me to do a painting of her dog. Now, I don't do dogs and animals, and that's not what I paint normally. So we just had a synchronicity with me working 22 hours to get this painting done. I just finished it this morning before I came on this program. So what do we got? We got a woman who has a dog problem. Now there's a synchronicity right off the bat.
That's actually pretty fun. I like that too, because because there's some synchronicities that could be a little eerie, or even, bringing up stuff that's disturbing and stuff. And actually on Project Archivist, I was doing a show with AP Strange, Matt Hopewell, and Rojan about humor in the paranormal. And, something like what you bring up now is just, it's fun and it's wholesome because it's about, dogs and family and how important companion animals are to us. And it gets back to, the name of my blog, which is about dogs. And yeah, no, that's wonderful. I like that a lot. That's really fun.
And then the other one was yesterday when we were talking to Mike. Mike is enthralled with Jung's writing. And of course, he's the one who coined the term synchronicity to start with.
Mm-hmm.
He was the first one to ever use that word. In fact, he and Freud had a bunch of fights over it. But what's kind of interesting about it is that I hadn't really thought about Jung for quite a long time. And so this morning I went in to get one of the books, and it fell open to synchronicity.
Oh, wow. No, that's classic.
Yeah. Now that one is really incredible. And it's all about what Jung thought synchronicity was about. I mean, it's kind of more than a coincidence, that's for sure. I mean, we talk about Jung yesterday, and then I drop a book, and the pages open to synchronicity. And another synchronicity is, yesterday I was talking about the I Ching, and Jung talks about synchronicities in the I Ching.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's just one after another. It's really an amazing chain. And my guess is that it'll continue until it runs out. That's the way they work with me. They just sort of, they start up. I expect another dog thing. I don't know what it's going to be. It scares the hell out of me, but I'm sure that there's going to be a dog thing going on today, besides the synchronicity thing that's going on right now and all that stuff. But anyway, those are two that I just thought were really interesting just in the last 24 hours.
Definitely on the relevance side. Yeah. I mean, Shadow Fox.
Yeah. This is talk about synchronicities, even in just a few moments, because my daughter, her favorite thing were dragonflies. That was just her spiritual quest. Dragonflies were her major thing. And it's quite cool because Myron has just stated and brought his daughter into the conversation about having to do a painting about a dog. Well, in this capacity, we've brought this whole thing in a round circle because when my daughter passed, I was sitting on the front porch, and there were a few family members that were sitting with me. And, I was still in shock, with her crossing. And, this dragonfly, the largest one I had ever seen in my life. And I was thinking of my daughter, Ayla, and all of a sudden, this huge dragonfly literally flew right in front of my face and hovered right at my third eye. And it was like I was stunned. I was looking at the beauty and the magnificence of this dragonfly and the symbolism of what this dragonfly was bringing to me. And it was like, I know she's okay. She made it. She's got her wings. And it was like everybody was just looking at this, like stunned. And then it had taken off around the corner. And then two other little dragonflies had come and just kind of floated around where everybody was. And so it's just so significant of how even Myron had just made the mention of speaking about his daughter. And then I was thinking of my daughter today. And then Paul brings up the dragonflies, and we're all bringing this into a cohesion, because my dogs right now are very quiet. So I just had to say that. I was like, yay, I get to talk.
Excellent. Is Lee around as well?
It's funny, about 24 hours ago, I watched a movie called Dragonfly.
Did you?
Yep.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
It's a very famous film about, it's a metaphysical journey that this man goes to find his daughter. His daughter is his daughter. And it's really a beautiful story, actually.
Yes, it is. I've seen that. And by the way, Lee is here. So if you'd like to speak to him, Paul, he is here.
It's just I like to know that both of you are around in the same place, because then I know that the entertainment value is going to be great. One of the big things I think Stephanie will also be saying is that after we've had a conversation is to actually note down if you suddenly see synchronicities turning up from the conversations and what goes on today. Won't you, Stephanie?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. And because I always like to kind of write up these things afterwards. It's just fun to see how it plays out. And actually, I was talking about being married, and of course, my husband's favorite, they're only like spirit animals, of course, the dragonfly. But yeah, I think that Artisan, I'm not seeing I'm just seeing your screen name as
I am called Shadow Fox.
Shadow Fox. Oh, what a beautiful name. You bring up what I think is a really profound synchronicity, and it illustrates, I think, a lot of what makes a synchronicity special and kind of distinct from a lot of other type of phenomenon, because it's like there's a lot of what they would call like a crisis or a death apparition, where like if you had seen your daughter there, that happens to a lot of people. They see their loved one, and usually it's a message of comfort. But you didn't see her, but you saw this highly charged symbol, and it was, it's just something prosaic on one level. It's just a bug, right? But it's just conveying that meaning at that particular moment about something that is incredibly important to you. And so many of these happen around very charged emotions. There's a lot of ones that happen around humor or sex, but then also very much about concern for loved ones. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that, the dragonfly is a big symbol, and the more that you dig into it, right, there's certain these animals that are iridescent and have the rainbow. It recalls to us, rainbows and those iridescence is always very associated with divinity, divine grace. In I think Haitian voodoo, like the Aloha, divine femininity. And these insects, such as, and a lot of amphibians too, dragonflies, butterflies, right? They go through this incredible transformation, right? The dragonfly nymph is a very different creature, and it lives underwater. And then it goes through this transformation where it becomes this incredible, they look kind of like just kind of weird, buggy, weirdo things, not colorful or anything.
You mean a bit like a centipede earwig shape, and then the fact that actually their whole DNA kind of changes and they liquefy before they actually reform again. That's also crazy.
Yeah, they go.
Yeah, this dragonfly, it was very remarkable, because it literally stayed right there. It hovered for well over a minute, which is like unheard of. And quite honestly, the colors in it were just iridescent, and they were actually her favorite colors, which was another phenomenal thing. It just had the turquoises, like the greens, and the it was just absolutely stunningly beautiful. It took my breath away. And my father used to send me butterflies. Okay. Like he passed like back in 94, and I always thought through butterflies with him. He'd always send them to me. And my daughter was highly aware of that, because we always spoke about it. So when that happened, it was that dragonfly did not go to anyone else. It only came to me.
Just out of curiosity, the butterflies, were they dead or imagery butterflies?
Oh, they were always alive, and they'd always fly around and come. They would literally come in. They have different times of the year for when they have their mating seasons, but this was not one of them. And there was a neighbor that actually totally witnessed this and had come. They just encircled me. There was an entire group that just came and encircled me and actually escorted me to my car as I had walked down the driveway and the road to get to my car, because we were actually discussing what happened with my daughter's death, because their daughter had also passed. So we were kind of comforting each other, and they could not believe. They said this has never happened in their entire lives, and they've lived in that house for over 45 years.
Wow. Can I just get this straight? You're talking that your father, when he passed away, sent you butterflies rather than he was alive and sent them through the post kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Because I was
symbolism always. Yep. He always sent, because that was one of my favorite things. And butterflies always appeared to me, but this was one. I mean, they still talk about that symbolism. We were sitting on the porch, and to this day, that woman is very much my elder. Okay, very, very much my elder. And we were discussing the death of our children, and they just could not believe. I mean, it's like a thing they talk about. The whole neighborhood knows about it by now. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I had wanted to talk about a particular example that happened to me this last fall with a friend. He's okay, but it gets to the similar thing of where it's around a highly emotionally charged thing, someone that you care about a lot. But it's not just like a premonition or straight telepathy or anything like that. It kind of works through these symbols. Eugenia Macer's story was a lady who, she was an artist, singer, playwright, poet, and she investigated a lot of paranormal events. And she talks about communication happening through kind of like a rebus, where you which, if you have certain symbols together, it means something different than each alone. Like if you have a white rabbit and a watch, right? You're thinking about the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland, right? Late for a very important date.
But just a quick one on that one. Did you see the previous tweets about the March hare and the fact in the Celtic mythology of symbolism, change and transformation, and the rabbit hole was taking you to other worlds at the same time?
Yes.
That was fantastic. Obviously, I don't want to go too far away from where Chupacabra put his hand up. And I know your story. Is it about to start or finish so that I can marry it up and we'll see whether you can stop or come after what you've just about to say, Stephanie?
Well, it's just an example that I wanted to use to
continue, and then we'll go to Chupacabra and find that one out.
Yeah. So I have a friend, Alex Boland. He is a writer and podcaster. John and Alex Hate Stuff. It's a comedy movie review podcast if you want to listen. And he has a number of magical realist fiction books you can find on Amazon if you like. And he's also a practicing chaos magician. But anyway, so we're always going back and forth. He lives up in Portland, and I'm always clucking over him a bit because he's younger than I am, and I always kind of worry about him being, there living by himself. Anyway, so last October, now I had been isolating pretty intensely, and I hadn't really been doing any grocery shopping for all that year. And then for whatever reason, I was out doing grocery shopping that day, and I was attracted to, there was a bunch of, I live in the Napa Valley. We have a lot of wine. There was a big wine section at Whole Foods. And so I was attracted to some of the wine labels. And so I was taking pictures of a few of them to send to different people. So there was one, and the name of the wine is Sinister Hand. It has like a black and white drawing of like a left hand kind of glove thing, gauntlet, and has blood dripping off of it, right? And I thought, oh, this will be fun. I know two people I'm going to send this to, one of whom was Alex. So I get home and I send this picture. Now, this is like a very unusual circumstance for me to actually be out of the house and seeing anything after like locked down all year. So I sent this picture out to Alex and this other person, and Alex writes back, and he's like, fun wine label. By the way, I'm in the emergency department waiting to get stitches because I just mashed my hand at work. And it turned out that he had injured 2 fingers on his left hand. He had fractured 1 finger bone, and he had sent me a picture with stitches on it. Now it's under the Synchronicity tag on my blog. I think it starts at telepathy, empathy. And it was his left hand. It was a sinister incident, right? Because he had it injured. And it's kind of eerie to look at just the kind of aesthetic sense of this wine label and his hand are the same. So I was taking a picture of this about the same time that he was getting this injury. So you could see where it's kind of a meaningful coincidence, and it's a little bit eerie. It was an unusual circumstance, but it's different from just if I was like, oh no, maybe I should get in touch with Alex because I think he's hurt himself. It's kind of like with extra steps and going through this kind of symbol language instead of just a straight weird feeling or me getting a vision of him being injured or something like that. So to me, that kind of gets at the what to me is the special aspect of synchronicity, is that it works through these meaningful symbols and symbol association. And so I think, if you're interested in synchronicity, I would suggest this is where poetry, fiction, art history, reading ancient myths, that type of thing can be very useful, as well as studying various tarot or other spiritual systems like for example, Tibetan Buddhism, the various paintings and tankas and stuff have a lot of in-depth symbolism, so it can get you kind of in the feel of looking at the world through a symbolic lens. Anyway, so I see some hands are up.
Oh, definitely. Chupacabra will be first up, and then Myron. But also nice to see you, Krista. And did you want to check your audio before we quickly go on to the questions?
Sure, I don't have anything to add, but it's
nice. No. I'm just checking it's all working well. Excellent. Good. Right. Chupacabra, take the stage. Right.
How you guys doing on this beautiful day?
Hi.
Good to talk to you. A great story so far. I thought what you guys shared was amazing. I was really touched by the dragonfly stories, especially. As a father, that touched me. I have a lot of stories about synchronicity. I think that that involve animals and insects. It's very strange. We could go on for a while, but one really quick one. I was on break at a job of mine, and I'm also living in Portland, right? This is in my early 20s, and just kind of a mechanic shop, and we were all spitballing. And somehow, me and the coworkers started talking about praying mantises, and I had never seen a praying mantis in like the wild or anything. I had seen one, obviously, like in a zoo. I don't know. I just never seen one before, and I hear people find them all the time, but I never did. And that's what we were talking about. And then it's my break, and I go, okay, I'm gonna walk across the street to the Burger King and grab a quick bite. And as I walk out of the Burger King I'm sipping a soda. It's probably like mostly ice at this time. And I thought a dragonfly flew at my face, and I just dodged it. And then I take 2 or 3 steps, and it dawns on me like, wait a second, dragonflies have very iridescent clear wings. What I just saw was not that. It was like a canvas looking, like opaque like wing. And I turn around, and sure enough, it's a praying mantis landing on a flower, like landing on a bush right outside the door. And I couldn't believe it. And I knew that no one would believe me. I knew it. And so I threw my all the soda and ice out of the cup, and I grabbed that mantis. I put it in the cup. I walk back to work, and I go, you guys will not believe what just happened. And they're like, what? I go, I fucking found a praying mantis. After saying I had never seen one, I found one. Sorry for my language.
I know. I was just going to jump on you for that one. You got another bite of this one.
Okay, so I see it, and they are so amazed that they actually are suspicious that I went and bought one in the time it took me to go eat a Whopper and come back.
You bought a black market praying mantis?
Yeah, where do you get one of those?
Yeah,
back alley. Right. I got a suitcase full of them. Which type do you want?
So interesting. Awesome. So I just love those stories. I love how they come together and how silly they can be and how funny they can be. And it's just an interesting thing when we come across them. And then I think, like anything that's not really tangible, like anything that that suggests meaning beyond what we can see, I think it becomes mysterious, and I've seen it take over people's imaginations to a detriment, because they become so obsessed with these syncs and so obsessed with what they mean, and I think people can get obsessed with like the rhythm and like the song without listening to the lyrics. And so like I think if we focus too much on the beat and the tempo of our experiences through synchronicity, I wonder if we're missing the lyrics, if we're missing the meaning behind what we're supposed to be seeing. Because as much of a high as it is to recognize, like, holy crap, and as it is, as fun as it is to talk about
bite two.
Oh, okay.
You're almost getting to listener. You got to keep those lips under control.
Okay, you are.
Otherwise, you make my editing a hell of a lot worse.
I'm as a video editor. I'm literally. I have a project open right now, and I'm editing audio and video together on a wedding. So like, I can feel you on that one. I'm not going to make your job any harder. So that's my story. That was my piece. I hope you guys are. I'm going to continue to listen.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well,
because the praying mantises are very heavily associated with aliens, so it's kind of this weird. They have this strange kind of aura or charisma to them anyway, and that's fantastic. That happened to me one time.
Can I give a quick check to yourself, because I know you said you got about an hour and a half. It's 10:08. I'm just checking on timings, because obviously we've got questions as well. Just want to make sure that we don't obviously run out of time for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm good, as long as Oliver contains himself. I think I'm doing okay. So
superb. Yeah. So once we get to the people who've got their hands up, if they can get their obviously questions to nice succinct bits, then that'd be great. We can get through a lot of them when people's hands go up. So please continue, Stephanie.
Oh, I just wanted to say that happened to me once. It was a strange incident, and it's another one where, there's no reason for anyone to believe me except for I still have the ring. So I was working at the sign shop, and every day I'd walk through the parking lot to town and get my lunch and a little walk and come back. Okay, so this was late morning, and my boss was telling me how she had an uncle, and he had a furniture store, and it was kind of a weird, because he had this kind of magical ritual that he would do without calling it magic. When business was slow, he would act like business was doing well. So he'd like book a cruise with his wife or something like that, or buy her something fancy, and then business would pick up. So that's kind of interesting. But she told me this story, and I'm like, I like that idea, except for I think I'd like diamonds rather than a cruise. And she's like, I think I like the cruise. So ha ha ha. Okay, literally less than 10 minutes later, I leave to go, clock out and take my lunch, and I walk through the parking lot and I see something sparkly. It was a diamond ring, which I still have. But it's the same type of thing where you're just kind of like, oh, blah, 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 offhand joking, and like whammo. I wonder too about that, because she was talking about her uncle who did this. Basically, it's a magical prosperity practice that he did. So anyway, so yeah, that happens. I love that you that was your first encounter with the praying mantis people. So, and I'm glad that it was you swearing and not me, because it's usually me.
You only get one bite, and then I just boot you out and carry on without you. That would be it.
Oh no.
Right, so we got obviously Myron, Shadow Fox, then Fredwig. Questions or answers or information, or all three? Myron?
Okay, a couple of things. I remember Jung actually warned one time that what this gentleman was saying a minute ago, that the obsession with the unconscious can be detrimental to the normal world if one gets inflated. These are his words, not mine. Gets inflated about connecting with the unconscious and all the events that the unconscious presents, because it has a tendency to overblow what's really going on. That's just one statement from him. But what I really wanted to talk about was I had been like, I had a very, very bad decade, and I was in the army and all kinds of things, and I was on drugs and just to function. And to make it quick, my daughter we moved to this small town, and I used to go to this park all the time. And prior to this, I used to see my spirit guides all the time. This for almost 10 years, I didn't see them because these drugs were blocking it for some reason. Well, anyway, I didn't know about certain kinds of archetypal symbols. I just didn't know that they were archetypes. I thought they were just cartoons. I didn't understand that. And so I took a walk one morning, and so what comes walking right at me? A white rabbit with a watch and, a red jacket on. And then after the white rabbit came fairies and all kinds of beings that are all, psychopomps of one kind or another. They were everywhere, and they were just dancing and running and playing, and the white rabbit was checking his watch. I did paintings of all of this, of course, but the fact is that was not part of my thinking. I mean, I didn't think about Alice in Wonderland and the White Rabbit and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't, and those symbols became so real that they broke through the barrier of my separation from my own energy to let it be released. Mm-hmm. So the synchronicity there is that it had been blocked for almost a decade, and then it was white. It was tricked, because those are trickster figures. It was tricked into this new kind of awareness that I had. And right from after that, it was just one thing after another, after another, after another. And now it's been, 40 or 50 years of endless visions and recordings of them. So you could call that a kind of major synchronicity, because I didn't have any knowledge of white rabbits and psychopomps and all that stuff, because I wasn't studying that stuff. I was studying music and not that. And but it broke through my unconscious and changed my whole life. I mean, it was almost unbelievable how powerful they were. And now, of course, I have temporal lobe epilepsy, so mm-hmm. you can blame it on that if you want to. But the fact of it is just interfacing with these playful beings changed my whole life and made it go a whole new direction. And that's when I started doing my art. Actually, when I started recording them, and now I've got 8,000 works. And but anyway, it was an interesting synchronicity in the sense that it before I was on the drugs, I had all kinds of experiences, and then I was on the drugs, and then for some reason my unconscious picked those images. Now, Anthony Peake, who's going to talk next in April, wrote about this in one of his books. He quotes me in my book about this particular event, because I guess this is a common occurrence worldwide of seeing these psychopomps, and especially the white rabbit. Mm-hmm. And of course, white rabbits are divine in a lot of cultures. So anyway, that's just my blurb.
That is fascinating, and of course, I love it because as a girl growing up, I had my my copy of Lewis Carroll down. What was it? Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, and read them, loved them. And as I was discussing my near-death experience previously, the day that Alice goes down the rabbit hole is May 4th, and May 4th was also the birthday of the doctor who presided over my near-death experience that I was very close to as a patient for over 30 years. So, yeah, it's a very, it's almost like, how do you want to say, like a secret lodge or something of people that connect with their own creativity and this certain strain of esoteric knowledge and experience through Lewis Carroll's work.
Well, you know, if you believe in what Jung did, which is a collective unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
which I believe in, then it's just as likely that my unconscious would connect with those symbols and bring them to me for wholeness, for healing, as anything else. I mean, instead of a whiskey bottle, it's a white rabbit.
Yeah.
And, you know, and both of those are archetypes, by the way, even the whiskey bottle. So, and Lewis Carroll, of course, was a borderline epileptic. In fact, some people think he was an epileptic, but it's controversial about that. But anyway, but down the rabbit hole, I certainly went down the rabbit hole after I met the White Rabbit. That's for sure. For the next 20 years, I was a completely different person and completely transformed. And it took me 20 years to get through it. And so the power of these archetypes that are running around loose in our unconscious, once they become reality or experiential, then they really have a tendency to just push out almost everything else. And if you follow them, they kind of heal whatever is in the way. The fun of the event was something I hadn't experienced in a decade because I was in war and all kinds of things. There was no fun. And they were having such a good time that I just kind of went, wow, I felt like I was 5 years old. You know, I mean, we were having a good time, and I hadn't had a good time in 10 years, you know, and so that had a tendency to it changed my music at the time, it changed and all the rest. So the power of those symbols in the unconscious are just magical and transformative, and that's my old story.
Okay, I'm just checking did everyone hear Myron correctly?
There was a little bit
audio-wise. Sorry. Sometimes I was hearing in and out, right, but if you're hearing it, it's just on my end. No, but I mean, what I was hearing from that is very powerful from the statements for that whole 10-year period. And obviously, we could go into Harvey later on at some point after we've gone through some of the other questions, as in the film, being obviously a white rabbit as well. And so white, nobody actually saw him. So on to Shadow Fox. Yes, Stephanie?
Yeah. You know, there were a few great questions and points that were made. Tupacada had brought that up about not getting sucked into that, you know, kind of the spiral, I guess. But my father had counseled me as a young child, and he had told me, he said, when you are at peace and you can look at nature as the observer, all of nature will answer you. Nature will rally around, and there's not a question you can ask that nature will not answer. Nothing is held back. And so when we can look at all these synchronicities and, you know, recognize, well, what does this mean? Or what does that mean? And many times, you know, people do have something like, oh, maybe they have an interest in like little sweethearts. All right. So they're walking down the road and they could be thinking about somebody, or they have a question about something. And then all of a sudden they look down and there's a sweetheart rock. Or it could be anything such as...
Can I ask you, Shadow Fox, what's a sweetheart rock for us who don't know what a sweetheart rock is?
It's a rock that looks like a shape of a sweetheart.
What's a sweetheart? Are we just an actual physical cartoon shape of a heart? Is that what you mean? Right, yes. Because I was confused.
No, I'm sorry. But yeah, no, all of nature will answer. I mean, you could be thinking, for instance, about, hey, I haven't thought of this person in a while, or I'm thinking of this song, and then all of a sudden you're driving down the road, and then guess what happens? The song comes on. That is all part of nature, believe it or not. But the thing is
just to add to that, sorry for butting into you, talking about that song, on the particular anniversary of my friend's death this year, the first year of his death, I've got something like 7,000 plus songs on my SD card that goes in the car, and lo and behold, the first track that started playing randomly was one of his favorite ones, and there's only one copy of it within that 7,000. And I thought, yeah, there you go, because of his sense of humor and the way that he was, it's kind of that imprint mark.
Yeah, and see, this is how, all of nature will answer. If you have a question, all you have, I mean, if you don't ask, it can't be answered. And so it's kind of like, once you're in that, being in the observer position, everything and anything is possible. And it really does keep you from getting sucked in, because you're more of a detached. And so you don't have like an emotional component wrapped and entwined within the answer. And I think that can give a very good grounding for people who are specifically looking at synchronicities and not necessarily reading something else into them in order to fit. So again, it's if people choose to take a look at it, how do you do that? Detach the emotional component from it. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I find is it's normally when in the liminal moments of when I'm doing something else, it will pop in as a kind of distraction when my routine is disrupted. Things like that will happen when I'm not really thinking about it. And that's the interesting connection point I find. I don't know if that happens to yourself, Stephanie, as well.
Yeah, it depends for me. And I no, Shadow Effects, I think you make some great points in Tupacabra too about staying grounded. And I wanted to mention that I have an article on my blog called How to Induce Synchronicities. And I have a lot there about how to get things kicked up, but I also have points and strategies and plans for how to keep yourself grounded and how to try and kick things down or calm things down if you feel like you're getting too out there or things are getting a little bit too exciting for you. And it's very possible to, and I recommend this if you're deciding you want to start trying to experiment this way, it makes a lot of sense to write things down. You want to write down if you have a plan for how to take apart your experiment, how to ground things, other things you can do to distract yourself, hobbies and crafts. Magicians always like to have crafts and hobbies going because it's a distraction and it keeps you grounded in the material world, right? You can use it for magical purposes, but you can also use it to just ground yourself in the mundane and the day-to-day and keep your head on straight, as it were. But it's also important, I think, to document and write down any weird experiences you have, any synchronicities, things like that. Lots of times what I will do is I'll be personally, just because I'm on the phone a lot, is I will just be taking screenshots of if I see a post or an article or a conversation that I have with someone, pictures that I have. If you take a picture of something, let's say that you, like when I saw those two moths, right? I took a picture of them. It helps me remind myself of that. It grounds that experience in the material, and it also grounds it in time and space, right? Because it'll be time and date stamped. So then you can go on later and you say, oh, this moth stuff was happening. And then you can, just make like a little chart, right? You can put out what your symbol is, like moth, or if it's a particular archetype, or if it's like a particular process that's happening. I had a friend, Simon Hesslager Johansson, who had a strange synchronicity about he was writing a couple articles about reviewing some heavy metal bands for a magazine that he works for. and he left and he put on a shirt. He's really into heavy metal. A Mantar is the name of this group, right? He puts on this Mantar like sweatshirt or shirt, goes outside, goes for a walk. He comes back. The articles that he had been writing on his USB drive got corrupted, so they disappeared. He had to write them over again, and actually he was happy because he felt the articles turned out better. But here the kicker is that group Mantar was known for having an evil experience where they had been recording an entire album, but then the files got corrupted on this guy's computer. So it's like the same process that happened. And he didn't know that his own files were going to be corrupted before he put on the sweatshirt of this band that had the same thing happen to them. And also he had interviewed that band to write an article about them for the same magazine. So it's
now did they actually something leach over onto him at that point? Would be another interesting thing to find out, wouldn't it?
Like a contagion, yeah.
Yeah. When you're finished on this story, we need to bring Fred in after you finish that one.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make the point that you can write these things down as far as the symbol, or if it's an archetype or like a process, something that happened, or a gesture. All these kind of things can be reflected in synchronicity, and then kind of map them out according to like a date and time. And that can be useful. Sometimes I'll find when I do that, the things actually ended up being a little bit weirder than that I remember them coming afterwards. But it's another way that can help you stay grounded if you kind of approach it more systematically that way. And I've actually felt it in my experience. You'll have stronger synchronicities that way too. So yeah. So now on to Fred, right? He's been very patient.
You guys are just amazing. I wanted to start off touching on what you were talking about in terms of like earlier, where you tried experimenting and saying names or an idea or a phrase and just seeing what happens, And so I have been doing the same thing, which is awesome because I've been seeing more and more. But
Ooh, cool.
I wanted to loop it all the way back. You guys are talking about dogs and insects and dragonflies and like all this stuff. And that whole time I was filling up my bike with air so I could run with my dog. And I just thought it was really funny. And so then finally, what I wanted to loop this all back to is there was this point where I want to say like, I documented 2 of them, but I know that it happened more than a few times. I just wasn't like too conscious of it, but these insects, like for example, the first one that I got was, it was this fly up in, I was delivering in Oregon, and he was just chilling right there while I was waiting. And he was, I drive big rigs. So he was right there next to the window, like seated, or he was next to the armrest. Mm-hmm. And so he started spinning around and like, it looked like he was dancing. And I was just like, what is this? And so I was just like, cause personally I'm afraid of insects, but for my whole life due to like some traumatic moments that people wanted to do to me. But I'm trying to get out of that, but anyway, that was a weird thing. Right. And so then that was my first experience that I noticed. And then there was another one, maybe like a week or 2 ago, where it was a moth, and this moth stayed in the cab for like, I want to say at least 12 hours because I couldn't get it out. So finally, there was a point where it was in the same exact position where that fly was, and it started doing circles as well. And so, like, at that moment, I was just like, oh, man, like, I was going to say, damn. But, like, at this moment, like, it's happening again, and it's doing the same exact thing. Like, it would be counterclockwise. Both of them did counterclockwise. And so I was just like, dude, what is this, And so, like, my phobia of, like, insects got the best of me after this beautiful experience. So I, like, threw it out the window. But it was just awesome because like all you guys are talking about in terms of like these insects and these like little, I think Shadow Fox said it, like once you start asking the right questions, you get the answers if you're willing. And I feel like there was just a pivotal point where I was able to step back and like not, I guess, like let go of the ego and know that you're part of the network, and then you can be tapped into the network. And once you do that, you can start seeing the numerology, the signs, the nature designs, and like all those things. And I just want to say thank you guys. I think everyone's on the right path, and this is just like awesome to hear these things. But I also did want to mention that insect spinning around thing, because I'm just really curious if anyone has ever seen that. Because like I tried to search the internet, and like I couldn't really find anything. And I know that that's like not something that you can like specifically say like what does it mean when a bug starts spinning in circles, you know? But like I'm just really curious. But thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate everything.
No, well, thank you. That's the only thing I could think of is, sometimes like in a house or something, there'll be like a spot where bugs tend to get into because of just how bugs are. But it's kind of, there's sometimes when bugs, that they'll get various diseases that can cause them to move in odd ways. But, it could just be that the this is a little bit fanciful, but sometimes I wonder, bugs communicate a lot by how they move, right? And so it's kind of making me think like the fly, for whatever reason, that was going around there in a circle, kind of created kind of a little bug portal in the cab of your big rig there, and it drew the moth into the same thing, which sounds kind of, it's kind of jokey, but then sometimes I kind of wonder about these kind of energetic after effects can actually occur. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I'd say keep watching the bugs, and it'd be great that, the more that you can, interact with them or encounter them without freaking out. Because I know sometimes, especially if things happen when you're in your more formative years, and people are rude about it, it could be hard to get over that reaction. So hopefully that'll, ease up with you. You'll be able to relax around bugs more.
There is another reason why sometimes insects do what they do, spinning around without flying. It's because they're going to a location where they think they can actually find mates as well.
Oh,
so instead of flying around and being energetic, they can actually just keep spinning around.
So Fred,
I was thinking it was just a vortex of loving grace, so that he wouldn't be so freaked out with their presence there. It's
well,
like,
it could be one of many, or he just got a new good friend.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. A vortex of grace. But I do have to say. Goodbye. I have to take my leave here. I have to be in a Zoom meeting. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
But if you guys are still here, I will return. But it has been absolutely awesome, and thank you. I am so grateful that I actually got a chance to meet you guys, meet you, Wander and Birch. Really, seriously, it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for that. That's really a very moving experience with your daughter there. So thank you.
Yes, and I know I am greatly honored by that, and it's because I knew what the symbolism meant. So anyway, thank you all. It has been fantastic, and I'm Shadow Fox.
Always to have your pleasure. Well, have your pleasure. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Great, my teeth are not in. And also, Lee must be laughing by the side of you by now as I stumble across more words.
Yeah, he is. And actually, he was going to try to say something to you guys, and then it was like you're trying to get the hands up and the dog's barking. So I will definitely try to come back.
Okay, definitely. That'd be great. Yep. And also, Stephanie, how are you doing on time? Because obviously we've got Meyer and we got Whitebeard with his hand up at the moment.
Yeah, I'm doing okay so far.
To help our research and understanding, leave Perceptions Today's podcast reviews, subscribe to the podcast, along with the other social media accounts, and share. Come and join our live events. That way we can get together and have thoughtful discussions along with advancing our understanding of concepts as we go along.